Hi, I'm DeAndre Mullen. Today is Sunday, May 28th. I'm here interviewing my grandparents on my father's side. Can you please introduce yourselves?
I'm Amelia Mullen. I was born in 1946 and I was raised in Harlem in the Lincoln housing.
And I'm Gerald Mullen. I was born October 8th, 1945, and I was born in Elizabeth City, North Carolina.
So this is for my AP project, AP US History project. I have to interview people who were born before 1977 to compare how life was from back then to how life is this year. So my first question is, are there any fads that you guys had, any trends that were wild back then?
Well, we did basically what you teenagers do now, but we didn't have, we were very resourceful in what we did in terms of playing games. We used homemade items that we made basically, and that's what we played with in terms of games. You know, we went to school and did many of the things that you guys do. And we shared things with our families and our friends. In particular fads, we wore mostly dresses at that time. We didn't wear a lot of pants, the girls didn't anyway.
Well, the boys, I guess the guys I hung out with, we was mostly into jazz as the time that it was. There was no rock and roll was in, but a lot of the guys we started thinking out of ourselves as adults. So we moved to jazz. And we did a lot of that. Even some of the guys that went into a lot of dancing, they did calypso dancing and the Latin dances. But things were pretty much the way they were as you live in now, except we didn't have the modern conveniences of things to do. We had to be more innovative about how we proceeded things. So basically that was it.
So you mentioned how you and your girls and you and your boys would go out and do what you would do. So where did you attend grade school, high school, college? Did you maintain friendships throughout those years?
Well, we went to the neighborhood schools in Harlem, and it was also the projects where I lived. You were involved with most of the kids in the neighborhood and in the projects. So you went to the local schools. I went to elementary school, and then I went to junior high school in the neighborhood. Then we moved not my family, but we had to go outside of our neighborhood to high schools. That was the difference. So you went to neighborhood outside high schools. I attended the High School of Commerce, and I maintained long-term relationships with most of my friends, and we still think about those times, talk about those times, growing up in the Harlem.
And really, I guess most of the kids our age, when we were younger, we all went to the neighborhood schools.
Yeah.
And I went to elementary school, which was around the block from where I lived. I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And I went to junior high school, which was a couple of blocks further up, but it was still part of the neighborhood because it was like 3 blocks away. And when I went to high school, and the high school hasn't changed its name, I went to Automotive High School. And I didn't really maintain too many friends from school because basically I came out of high school, I may have worked a year, then I went in the Army, and I came home and it was maybe 2 or 3 guys that I still know and still in contact with, but basically that's about it.
So you said that you went to Hunter College. What did you major in? Or where was your field of study?
Well, my field of study and major at the time at Hunter College, you could have only had major in a major other than education. But education was what they considered a secondary major. So my major while in Hunter was in psychology. So it's a psychology major and an education minor.
I went to college after maybe about 4 years out of the Army and on the GI Bill. And I was really just going for an associate's degree. And I got halfway through. So I basically have about a year of college. And that's it.
So my next question, you served in the military, you said. Where did you serve and what duties did you have?
Well, I'm a Vietnam vet. And my duties were, I was a communication specialist. So between Morse code and radio teletype in the Army. That was basically it. But when I got out, and came out in '67, and it was during the time Vietnam was still just really starting to get started. But it was so many protests and whatnot about the returning vets, and we weren't getting the right treatment coming home. And I really got out of the service. I really wasn't going to ever go back in the military as long as I lived. But for some reason, money, I joined the reserves. And in the reserves, I stayed there for about 3 or 4 years. And then from the reserves, I went into the National Guard. And just a transfer over to the National Guard from the reserves. And I was in the reserves, and I got caught up in Desert Storm. So I was in the first Gulf War, 1990 to 91. And I got out in 91. In 91, when I was in Desert Storm, I was a truck driver. So I was a squad leader with 7 trucks assigned to me. And we came home, became a platoon sergeant. And I was a platoon sergeant till the end of 91. And I just got out, my contract was up, and I got out.
So you said how when you came back from serving in Nam, you were mistreated due to all the protesting and stuff. So I wanna know how, as being African Americans, how was life back then compared to like how life is today for African Americans?
Well, there were some opportunities for us that moved us into what they called back then middle class. So we had educational opportunities and job opportunities, and we both share in that we went into civil service jobs. Teacher, and he has Department of Sanitation. So in most events, we didn't have the experiences that our parents, of course, had before us. But there were noticeable things that sometime in hiring, but they really didn't have a direct effect on how we lived our lives, because we were able, when we got married, to buy a home. We bought a home. And so we were fortunate, I think. And
well, I feel that really like coming home from the military, and it was a time just after the March on Washington, and things started really getting better, I think, for black people because of the new mayor, Lindsay, and the way it was, that the situation for black people, because like I say, I was from the South. I was born in the South, and I visit the South quite often at a younger age coming up, and I remember going south and in places that black people couldn't stop on the road, where you couldn't go to hotels or things like that unless there were designated areas for blacks. But we had to cross Chesapeake Bay, and right now there's a bridge tunnel that goes across the Chesapeake, where before you had to take a ferry. And the black people was on the back of the ferry, the white people was on the front of the ferry. There was a sign, whites only, blacks only, as far as the water fountains, the sitting places. So you knew your place. But being from New York, I experienced a different kind of freedom, whereas you didn't have in the South, and I know the people didn't have, because I was in the service in the South before being shipped out.
So, in your opinion, what do you guys think it means to be American?
well, I think to be an American is a very, very fortunate thing, Because when I look around the world and the nation today, I do see where people really don't have the freedom that we have in terms of our governance and our democracy. We're able to say things and produce things and engage in activities that many other nations are not allowed to do. I feel the freedom whenever I travel, and we travel often. I do see the difference in the democracy in other countries, and I'm always happy to say, well, I'm glad to be an American because, to put it bluntly, at least I know I'm free. And hopefully in the generations to come, they can do the same.
Well, to be an American, I think, is just the freedom of self, meaning that whatever I feel like I want to do, I can do. There's no restrictions on anything that we do in this country. If you go to other countries, you find that you're not able to just go places. Like in the United States, you can go anywhere you want. You got a passport, you can travel the world. So I say, like being an American is really a freedom that we worked for all our lives, especially as a black person, because we couldn't do the things we do now years ago.
Have there been any important events, such as like local events, national, international, that like have affected you guys at all?
Well, of course, living as long as we've been living, we've seen quite a number of things. I'm thinking about the riots that took place in the 60s that we actually experienced in terms of young people looking at our neighborhoods being destroyed before our very own eyes, and how we came back from that. And that's vivid in my mind because I remember living through that, and it was amazing. My dad also was politically minded, and he went to the March on Washington. And as a family, we sought to move into a place of where, as African Americans or Black Americans, that we felt we became civic and community minded as a result of many things that happened to us as we grew up in Harlem and in that time.
Well, when you talk major events,
Yeah.
like my wife said, we've seen most of the major events.
Yeah.
We've seen the man walk on the moon, and
Yeah.
space shots and this and that. But it brings me back to the riots. I guess when you're from New York, the riots is a main thing because you've seen your neighborhoods change.
Yeah.
I remember coming home from the Army and going in the neighborhoods like on Broadway and Brooklyn, and I was amazed that nothing was there anymore because everything was torn up. That was one of the major places that people rioted at and went looting the stores, and some of the stores never opened up again. So neighborhoods changed, and I think people have a different outlook on things, especially people my age, because they see how things could go, and not just the riots, but the blackouts. When the blackouts happen, and when major events go on that we feel that we are this is our protesting against something, so we riot. And it's amazing how people take things for granted, that it took us years to get where we were, and we take a step backwards because we tear up our own stuff, And I think people are starting to get together, and they starting to realize that it was a waste, and they're changing their attitudes about things. And I think people now are more politically inclined because you see the plight of the black race, and we are really taken for granted. And it takes a little knowledge to move up in life.
Thank you for your time. I'm DeAndre Mullen, and this has been my oral interview.